What happened to Palpatine's royal guards after his final death? Greetings again and welcome back to the archives. The Imperial Guard were stated to be the most elite fighting force that the Empire had to offer. Despite being largely unable to touch the Force, the guards were able to contend on the level of trained Force sensitives. Their insane level of physical ability and loyalty was what made them the perfect guard to the Emperor, who didn't want to reveal his identity as a Dark Lord even in the face of danger. After Palpatine died on the second Death Star, however, many of the royal guards chose to end their own career on the bladed tip of their spears. But for those that stuck around and were aware of Palpatine's return, they got transported to the world of Biss where they would continue their service. But of course, even that ended too, with all of Sidious's clone bodies being destroyed, which left behind one sole survivor of this deadly squad of protectors. Today's story, we will be exploring the three-part Crimson Empire comic. We will be prioritizing the path of the Royal Guard himself without deviating as best as possible. Though I highly recommend that you check out Crimson Empire, as it is an excellent read-through and very well drawn, as well as has fascinating galactic intrigue. And if you enjoy us doing full comic plot summaries, then be sure to let us know what other stories you want to see explored down below. Now, this story is the story of Kanos, the very last of the Royal Guard. Kanos got his start the way that all Royal Guards would, in the Elite Guard Academy on the planet of Yachor. It was harsh and a desolate place meant to cool the weak and to strengthen the strong. Yinchor had once been inhabited by a sort of reptilian species that had been all but wiped out or driven off of the planet by the Empire to create a more lonely. This was intentional to create an even darker environment. Initiates were harvested from dozens of the Empire's top squads across the military branches, and they were deemed the best of the best. But even so, their training had not yet begun. They were taught the deadly art of the Yachani warriors, a combat system which turned a person's body into a living weapon. They were then put into a pressure cooker known as the Squall, which was a platform battle arena which hung over a deep pit. Day and night, the trainees were drilled against one another. It was here where Kanos and his fellow trainee, Karnor Jax, constantly sparred against one another. Jax was one of the top performers in his group, because unbeknownst to him, he was actually Force sensitive. But the day would soon come when both Jax and Kanos would remember for the rest of their lives. The day that the Emperor and Lord Vader visited Yinchor. Sidious stepped out to meet his soon-to-be guards, to build rapport with them, a deep connection. In an odd moment, we get to see the Emperor show his kind and fatherly side, as he thanks the trainees for giving up so much of their lives in order to serve him, their lives themselves, even going as far as to say that they honor him with their sacrifice. This, of course, is a brilliant mind play by the Emperor. By speaking the words of graciousness and honor, it reinforces their brainwashing, their indoctrination to ensure that each and every guard is fanatically loyal to Palpatine alone. But then, almost in direct contrast to how he spoke so kindly to the guards, he calls out Lord Vader for a demonstration. Vader immediately demands to know who their best pupil is. One of the trainees steps forth by the name of Bur Danid. Vader takes the man, lifts him out of the Squall, and the two of them arm themselves with the Royal Guard's double vibroblades. Vader instructs the trainee to attack him, to hold nothing back. Kanos mentions that Danid's attacks and defenses were flawless. He had the perfect technique. He had been the best of the Royal Guard. But Vader toyed with him as if he were a child with a toy, made a joke of their champion in front of all of the initiates. In one quick movement, Vader severed the boy's arm and kicked him off of the platform to his death. Afterwards, he turned to the traumatized troopers, the trainees, and told them that if he was the best of them, that they were not fit to serve the Emperor, not even fit to die for him. This was the environment that Kanos and Jax and the rest of the guards were born into, trained into, abandoning their past identity and giving it solely to the Emperor. But it would make them inhumanly powerful as well. The Royal Guards were trained in pairs so that they could grow from one another's strengths, to learn from one another's weaknesses, becoming brothers in the process. Kanos' partner was named Lemet Tak, and only those two, along with Jax and his partner, would survive the entire Royal Guard training process. But at the very end, Palpatine ordered each pair to be brought individually before him within his throne room, where he then revealed why he wanted them trained in pairs. When Kanos and Tak entered, he said that there was only one spot for a Royal Guard available in his force, and they would need to know which of the two were worthy to fill that void. They would now need to prove their loyalty, to kill one another. A fight to the death. Only one student would survive, and at his command, Their training took over their bodies, and the brothers fought one another to the death. Kanos was the victor, stabbing his best friend in the stomach with his vibroblade and emptying his guts. And even though he was accepted into the service of Palpatine, Vader wanted to prove one final point. He commanded Kanos to fight him next, and within a matter of seconds, Vader delivered a glancing blow which left a large lightsaber scar across Kanos' face. This was just to prove that no matter how skilled that he thought he was, he would always be inferior to the dark side. But now we venture to the year 11 ABY. Palpatine is dead, and what remains of the Empire is in total chaos. A temporary ruling council of Moffs has been established, as well as admirals that has been formed to maintain order, but they are too splintered in their power. Each member has conflicting ambitions. The Empire is on the brink of collapse, but one man has risen up to take control of the Imperial remnant, Karnor Jax, who by this point in time had become one of the Sovereign Protectors. The Sovereign Protectors were essentially the absolute best of what even the Royal Guard could offer. They had ascended to this position through great bloodshed and victory in war. But not only is Jax the best of the old guard, but he has finally received some training in the Force by this point, from none other than the Sith Lumaya. Jax has now a new ambition, deciding that he should be the one on the throne to create a new empire. In fact, he actually paid off Palpatine's physician to intentionally create defective clone bodies of the Emperor. This is why they age so rapidly when Sidious transferred his body and his spirit into them, leading to his ultimate downfall. Jax had been the nail in the coffin, the guard that betrayed his emperor. The royal guards learned of this treachery, however, and they all swore an oath to destroy Jax for his crime. However, Jax was 2 steps ahead of them. He ordered a ruthless attack on the royal guards and the base on Yinchor, and destroyed the academy and all of the guards in totality. Waves upon waves of stormtroopers assailed the royal guards, and even though they fought hard, not even they could stand up to the endless onslaught of the stormtroopers. Tsunamis of white faces. Finally, the final 2 royal guards would ensure that their oath did not die with them. One of them stayed behind to sacrifice himself, while the other escaped. The one who managed to leave was Kanos, the last of the royal guard. Using blackmail, Jax put himself in a special position which allowed him to control the ruling council, but his ambition did not stop here. Jax had it on his mind that he is to replace the Emperor as the new Dark Lord of the Sith. But no one else knew of this true plot, except for one man, the last of the royal guards that survived, Kanos, his former classmate. Kanos hid out on the fringes of space, gathering his resources, dodging Imperial forces. He had become an exile to the Empire that he had once loved, and served with his entire being, but he was no longer loyal to them, only to the memory of the master that he served. Jax wanted nothing else but to find this last survivor, as he is the one person that presents the greatest threat to his plan, simply because he knows about what Jax did to the Emperor's bodies. If that were to ever reveal itself, Jax's bid for the throne would utterly crumble. Kanos, now on the run, took no chances when dealing with the Empire, and had absolutely no qualms about slaughtering anyone that stood in his way. When a stormtrooper garrison tried to find him at his home, they were met with the trap as the entire house exploded. It was a trap that Kanos had left behind. Finding one of the Emperor's elite would definitely prove to be a tricky process. Meanwhile, on the neighboring world of Feda, he attempted to hide out in a bar, only for a group of Imperial officers and stormtroopers to start a problem with him. And this is where we get to see how he was able to survive for so long. And as an officer pulls out his blaster on Kanos, the guard unveils his double-bladed vibro sword. He kills the officer then and there. 3 other officers stand in his way though, but he stabs one of them and pins his sword, murdering the other 2 officers before they can ever pull the trigger on their own blasters. A garrison of stormtroopers was next, responding to what they heard in the back, and after killing 2 more Imperials, Kanos deflects a blaster bolt from one of the troopers. He single-handedly ends the party with another spin of his sword, which delivered 2 simultaneous cuts so accurate that they perfectly slit the throats of 2 stormtroopers. This was the power of a royal guard. They display Jedi-like skill and accuracy with death. By this point in the galaxy, it was said that only the royal guards were anywhere close to the skill of a Jedi Knight. But not wanting to be discovered, Kanos escaped the bar with the help of a sympathetic stranger who turned out to be an agent of the New Republic. Kanos is brought up to meet with the leader of the rebel cell by the name of Whitesand, who determines that since they have the same enemies, that they must be allies. A man of Kanos' skill is very useful to the New Republic as they attempt to take out the last remnants of the Empire. Kanos begrudgingly allies with them, simply because it is the most convenient way to destroy Jax and to get revenge on the traitors to the Empire. However, Kanos has absolutely no interest in remaining allies with the New Republic, or supporting any rebel movements. After all, he is an Imperial at heart. His only love was his Emperor, but now he is gone, so all he has left is revenge. Kanos attempts to keep his status as a royal guard hidden from his new friends, however, until the secret rebel base is attacked by the Empire. The Empire has placed a manhunt on Kanos after the bar incident, and the sympathetic stranger who led Kanos to the world is now also revealed as a double agent and a traitor for the Empire. By this point, the location of Kanos was being reported to the ears of Lord Jax. With the rebel base under siege, Kanos at last dons his crimson armor and makes his appearance known on the battlefield in the light of day. A red royal guard, the last of them. It was now time for the Emperor's elite guard to fight on behalf of the rebellion against what he saw as a false emperor and empire. The Crimson Warrior descends upon the battlefield like a blood-soaked angel of death, wreaking havoc in the Imperial front line. One of the rebel squads has been completely outflanked and would have been wiped out entirely had Kanos not arrived just in time to completely turn the tide of battle. Wielding his vibro sword in his left hand and his blaster in his right, he was truly a one-man army, cutting his way through waves of stormtroopers, cutting cleanly through their craniums and stabbing through their armor like it was made of butter. Right when a TIE interceptor was about to make a pass on the rebel ground forces, Kanos whirled around and aimed his blaster pistol straight into the cockpit of the ship. With a single bolt, he bullseyed the pilot and sent the interceptor crashing right into the Imperial forces below. It was after this when the enemy ordered a full-fledged retreat, terrified of the Emperor's chosen, one who had inflicted such warfare and blood, killed more than any other rebel soldier, maybe even more than all of them combined. And after word reached Karnor Jax, he knew that he had to go personally. After receiving a full report on the situation, he knew it was time to kill the last of his brothers. Meanwhile, Kanos is insisting on leaving the New Republic, striking off on his own, and despite their proposal for him to join the rebellion and the New Republic, he still insisted that they could only ever be enemies, that his allegiance now lie only with the dead. As a thank you though, the rebels help him off of the world in a captured TIE bomber. In order to keep the Imperials off of his tail, Sin actually manages to dress as Kanos, pretending to be him returning to the ship that he arrived to the world in. Immediately, she is captured by Jax and his Imperials who had been waiting for him. Jax proceeds to have the woman tortured and interrogated on where he ran off to. Finally, he is able to break her will. Only once Jax threatens to orbitally bombard the world and the rebel base. It is only then that the rebel divulges that they helped Kanos get off of the world and that he was going back to Yin Chor. Jax discerns through the Force that she is telling the truth, and he knows that his old classmate has gone to the world to end where it all began. But it wouldn't be long after Lord Jax left the world that Rogue Squadron and the New Republic arrived to annihilate the Imperial occupation, putting an end to part of the false empire at least. The self-proclaimed Dark Lord, however, arrived on Yin Chor to face down his old rival. Kanos had one surprise left though, and ordered that his TIE bomber remain in orbit, wanting the Empire to find it. As soon as Jax's Star Destroyer arrived, they pulled the bomber in with their tractor beam. However, Jax knew that his old friend thought like a warrior, and he immediately departed from the Star Destroyer on his personal shuttle. As soon as he did this, it was discovered that the TIE was a decoy, and it detonated a bomb within, which completely destroyed the Star Destroyer. Jax remains completely undeterred, however, despite having his ship destroyed by a single man, and he has his shuttle land on Yin Chor with a squad of shadow troopers at his back. He sends them into the ruins of the Royal Guard Academy to find Kanos. However, he didn't actually expect them to survive. He simply needed them to stall while he would set his own trap. Within the ruined academy, the shadow troopers get taken out one by one. Despite being clad in bright red and fighting black armored stormtroopers, Kanos is the one jumping from the shadows, slaughtering them with their own weapons. Finally, he makes his way out of the ruins into the old arena, back to the Squall where they had all been born. At last, the traitor arrives as Jack prepares his vibroblade. This was a place of important history to both men. Countless times they had squared off in the Squall, and many times Jax had won. In fact, Kanos had never won. The two met in the center of the arena with a flurry of blades. Each strike was met with cold steel, as neither one landed a hit. Jax insisted that soon he was going to become as powerful as Lord Vader, or even as Emperor Palpatine had been. The two continued to duel, as the Dark Lord declared that he will rule the empire of Palpatine's throne to shape the galaxy in his image as a Sith. He managed to land a swift kick on Kanos and nearly runs him through. But the guard in red kicks the guard in black, nearly knocks him off the side into the pit. However, he doesn't take the opportunity to kill him there. He doesn't want Jax to fall to his death. Kanos wants to run him through with his blade, to know that he is gone. And so he kicks Jax's sword back over to him, commands him to pick it up. The fallen Sovereign Protector mentions that doing so was a mistake, and he begins to flex his abilities in the Force. Using the Force, he hurls a rock at the back of Kanos' head in a surprise maneuver. At this time though, the New Republic had made their way to Yin Chor, as the rebel had not forgiven herself for giving up the location of the final Crimson Guard, and had gone to help him destroy Jax's empire. The New Republic arrived just in time to see the ruins, and the two royal guards locked in mortal combat. It was then when they discovered the trap that Jax had laid for Kanos. He had ordered his personal officer to take high ground with a sniper, a dirty, an underhanded tactic in case Kanos somehow gained the upper hand. In the arena, Jax begins to offer his old friend a position. He reasons that Palpatine is dead, and so is the old Empire. There are no two men like them in the galaxy left, he says. They could rule it together. Kanos, however, believes in his honor. He states that his place on the council would be beside thieves and murderers. The Emperor had basically been killed by Jax's own hand, had been all of their brothers. Evenly matched, the two of them brawl ruthlessly. It becomes clear now that Jax's training in the Force never reached beyond the initiate level, and it is not proving to be the massive advantage that he had hoped for. Nevertheless, he does strike Kanos in the side with his blade, but fueled by rage, the Red Guard kicked his enemy down, hurled his vibro sword like a javelin. Filled with rage, Kanos delivers his final blow, stabbing deep into Jax's shoulder. It's at this point that the Dark Lord is about to order his sniper kill Kanos. Unfortunately for them, however, the sniper had already been disposed of by the rebels. As the New Republic arrives, it is Mirith that begs, telling Kanos that they can take Jackson alive. For with all he knew about the Imperial Remnant, he could end the war in a matter of months if they used him properly. Leveraging the fact that they would take him without harm, Jax summons one of the rebels' blasters to his hand and attempts to shoot Kanos in the head. But that is when the so-called Dark Lord gets a reality check. Kanos slaps the blaster out of his hand with the end of a vibroblade, and then stabs him with the other end. As he sinks to his knees, the last words of Jax were utter confusion, saying, "But your friends want me alive." And Kanos informs him that they are not his friends. Kanos announces Jax's execution for his crimes, and stabs him yet again, but is interrupted by the New Republic, as the rebel steps in front of Kanos' blade. But the movement is too decisive. In a moment of horror, Kanos stabs the rebel trooper with his vibroblade, and they are murdered immediately. Mirith is mortified at what Kanos has done, and asks why he would do such a thing after they helped him. And now we are reminded of who Kanos is. He is no hero. He is loyal to the Emperor alone, loyal to a path of vengeance, not to the rebels, not to the New Republic. He apologizes coldly, but he states that he had never asked for their help, but that her friend has died for a warrior's cause. By now, Jax too was dead due to his injuries, as Kanos takes the traitor's helmet and throws it deep into the Squall's pit, being unworthy of wearing it, even in death. Kanos then leaves to continue his path of vengeance on the remaining members of the Imperial Council, and the story ends with Mirith Sin declaring that Kanos is a condemned man, a man who will die by her hand, one way or another. And thus would end the first run of the comic. Time would pass, and the state of the Imperial remnants was growing ever worse. With the death of Karnor Jax, the ruling Imperial Council was left without a figurehead whatsoever. This caused all of the council members to start vying for their own positions of power. They were all now more nervous than ever about Kanos. They were aware of his desire and his promise that he would murder them all. And now, they no longer had the protection of Lord Jax, the only man who they believed could destroy the last of the Red Royal Guard. All of this was compounded by the fact that yet another head of their council had been murdered in a mysterious bombing. The members of the council now understood that the head was going to always have a target painted on their back, and they were each dropping dead by the day. The sudden power vacuum left the overturning of the Empire, as the galaxy's most superpower at the time now looked more like a criminal organization like the Black Sun, desperate and dangerous. Not to mention the Black Sun, seeing the Imperials weakened, were now vying for more control of the galaxy themselves. But they each had one thing in common. They were both trying to evade the New Republic. The galaxy of this era is much like the Wild West, as the New Republic is scrambling to consolidate new order and new power. Elsewhere in the galaxy around this time, Leia and Mon Mothma would be working together to restore the rule of law when Luke Skywalker began searching for potential Jedi to fill in his academy. This is the era in which the second chapter of our story begins. As for Kanos though, his hunt would eventually lead him to the planet of Barra Mora. After scouting the area, Kanos found that the planet was ruled by a man by the name of Boss Banjir, the nephew of Admiral Lon Banjir, a member of the Imperial Interim Ruling Council. Banjir had several bounty hunters under his employment as well, and had hoped to capture Kanos, hoping to please his uncle. With the death of Jax, the ruling council was spurred to offer an even greater bounty for Kanos' head. With a fortune on his head, Kanos needed an ally, and quickly, and he realized the best way to hide was to take up the guise of a bounty hunter himself. And so Kanos purchased a unique set of armor, deleted his fingerprints from every database that he could find, and renamed himself Kenix Kill, an anagram of his own name in the secret language of the Royal Guard. As Kenix Kill, he infiltrated the ranks of Banjir and sufficiently impressed him with his skills in combat. While employed by Banjir as a bounty hunter, he gained his trust and learned all that he could. He pretended to know how he could find Kanos himself, and thus he was put in charge of a hunt for his own head. He then led the majority of the hunters on a wild goose chase, far away from their camp and resources. After bringing the men far away, Kanos revealed who he truly was, and effortlessly murdered all of the hunters, effectively crippling the hunting operation in the entire sector. Because Banjir was a member of the Admiral Banjir family, however, Kanos saw fit to destroy his base single-handedly, and to execute him with his own hand. After doing this, Kanos approached Grappa the Hutt for work, but Kanos was more interested in his connections, his connection to the Black Sun. Kanos knew that they were growing stronger every single day, and he needed to lay low, gain money for himself so that he could actually move around the galaxy and accomplish his assassinations. But hot on his trail was Mirith Sin, the rebel. She had now devoted herself to a vow to kill Kanos at any cost. She had also found work with Grappa the Hutt, wanting to use his resources to help find the man who she had sworn revenge on. Of course, she was currently none the wiser that Kanos was right under her nose, still hiding as Kenix Kill. But while she was searching for Kanos, her real mission, the real reason she came to Grappa, was confirmed, as it was revealed that the New Republic had grown suspicious that Grappa had been attacking their vessels, pillaging their ships. Meanwhile, the ruling Imperial Council was in a state of panic, especially after another high-ranking member was killed in a bombing. They were dropping like flies every single day, but their disarray increased with yet another one of their members being killed. Admiral Lon Banjir's corpse was found in a villa alongside a bloody knife, and by examining the evidence, the Imperial Council discovered that both the knife and the bomb were carried out by the symbol of the Royal Guard, particularly the insignia designated to Kanos. They came to believe that Kanos had intentionally made a statement to them that he was coming for all of their heads, and in response, the new leader of the Imperial Council, a man by the name of Zandel Kervis, issued the largest manhunt of Kanos in the entire galaxy, one of the largest bounties that the galaxy had ever seen, Jedi, Sith, or otherwise, with a bounty that would keep generations wealthy. Kanos could not go 2 steps on any populated planet. All of their fleet resources was dedicated to finding this one Red Royal Guard. However, little did any of them know that events in the council were being puppeteered by a mysterious shadow figure in the background. Their new leader, Caravis, answered to a strange man known only as Nom Anor, a black armored and a robed figure with a hood drawn over his face at all times to conceal his identity. Nom Anor was secretly a vanguard for the still distant Yuzhong Vong, those who were currently scouting and attempting to undermine the power structure of the galaxy, ready it for invasion. Despite all evidence pointing to Kanos being the killer, he was nowhere near the Imperial world of Ord Cantrell when the murder took place. He had actually been on the bounty mission for Grappa at the time of the murders, and Nom Anor was in fact the real murderer. He had slipped the Empire's defenses, assassinated both of the council members, but had framed Kanos. But things were only going to get worse. The Shadow Master also had Grappa the Hutt under his thumb, and he had been devising a sinister plot. Under Nom Anor's orders, Grappa the Hutt had been cloning all of the members of the Imperial ruling council, and they had already captured someone by the name of Frina Diasta, one of the council members, and replaced her with a clone successfully without the other members realizing it. It wasn't too long before Kanos began to find out about Nom Anor though, after Grappa hastened to answer a call from him. It would be here where Mirith would discover the real Fina, deep within one of Grappa's prisons. However, Sin's true purpose as a spy in Grappa's service had been discovered, and Grappa had ordered her to be delivered over to the strange Xanabar aliens, those who practiced death rituals upon all of the victims that Grappa the Hutt gave to them so graciously. Kanos would also have to leave very soon, as word got out that the Empire was looking for him, and it was revealed that they were on their way, now knowing the name of his bounty hunting alias. But before he left, after receiving word that Sin was to be murdered in the death ceremony, the Royal Guard immediately, without question, went to rescue her. After saving her from the death cult and several other dangers on their homeworld, Mirith was forced to call off her vow of death against Kanos, considering that he had now saved her life several times over, and now they would be calling it even. That night, the two had a heart-to-heart talk, where Mirith told Kanos about how her husband was a farmer and had been murdered by the Empire. She showed him a recording of Vader slaying innocents, declaring that the Emperor was unconcerned if their people starved, so long as they were always obedient. With the evidence shoved right into his face, Kanos was forced to reflect on the character of the man that he had loved, the man that he had been indoctrinated to serve. For the first time in many years, he began to think for himself, began to break away from programming. He became a man, and he broke from the training. The next morning, however, a raiding party attempted to recapture the humans that escaped from their death cult. But just as all hope seemed lost, one that was loyal to Kanos, a friend of his, arrived. However, Kanos would sacrifice himself to ensure the survival of his friends. He would end up catching a stray blaster bolt and being captured by the Xanabar. But luckily for him, even the barbaric Xanabar had heard of the massive bounty on the Imperial Guard's head, and decided that they were to turn him in for their grand reward. The Xanabar brought Kanos back to Grappa the Hutt, and he would remain in a cell as the Hutt negotiated with the Imperial Remnant. Shortly after, however, a Republic task force led by Mirith Sin infiltrated Grappa's headquarters and rescued the Red Guard from his incarceration. The New Republic group also liberated Frina Diasta and brought her back with them to New Republic space, now holding a member of the Imperial Ruling Council. Speaking of the Ruling Council, back on the world of Ord Cantrell, Caravis had decided to seize even more power as the head of the council, disbanding the council altogether, setting himself up as the new emperor. This was against the wishes of the Yuzhong Vong Vanguard, however, but Caravis was tired of taking orders, and decided that he was taking what was rightfully his as a true Imperial. He murdered all of the non-human members of the council, and imprisoned the others against the advice of his admirals. Fina, however, who had originally been placed on the council in place of her sick father, Baron Diasta, was none the wiser that she had been replaced with a clone, and when he got word that his daughter had been imprisoned by a man declaring himself as the new emperor, he seceded from the Empire completely and ordered a full attack on Ord Cantrell and what remained of the council. He ended up getting the clone of his daughter right back when Mirith and Kanos arrived to deliver him his real daughter. That was when Mirith diverged the full plot to replace all of the members of the ruling council with clones, puppet figures for the Black Sun. Confronting them, Kanos releases his vibroblade and ordered that the clone should die for her crimes against the Emperor and the Empire that he left behind. However, he was stopped from killing her by Baron Diasta and Mirith, who explained that the clone was under the control of the Black Sun Syndicate, that the clone was forced to comply against her own wishes. Mirith explained that now the entire council had either been killed or was imprisoned by the new false Emperor Caravis. This meant that he was now Kanos' true target. The Royal Guard hesitantly accepted this, however, deciding that it might just be enough to take revenge on a false emperor. Just before the attack, the Yuzhongvong enforcer would make a final appearance to Caravis, letting him know that the people that he represents had chosen a different path, a path which no longer included the fake emperor. Caravis panics as he hears this, but Nom Anor vanishes before his eyes. The Vong have abandoned him. But right before he disappears completely, he hears the words that he should enjoy his meeting with the last of the Royal Guard. Caravis panics as he hears this, and just then, Kanos, Mirith Sin, and Baron Diasta all walk directly into the throne room. Caravis orders his guards to kill them, and a firefight breaks out. The false emperor attempts to escape, but is followed by the Crimson Shadow. No amount of pleading or bargaining was able to save the emperor's life, as Kanos backhanded him to the ground and then speared him through with his vibroblade. Once all the fighting was done, Mirith Sin and Kanos shared a brief kiss and a goodbye. He knew her heart still belonged to the New Republic, and his heart, his allegiance, to the Emperor. And so he flew off into the stars, plans of completing his revenge by taking down Leia Organa and murdering the man calling himself Luke Skywalker, the killers of the Emperor. And thus, the second chapter comes to a close. Our story picks up again 2 years later. The New Republic's power is growing unabated, and galactic peace is finally beginning to settle in. Mirith Sin has become the chief of security for Leia's family. However, she fears that soon that Kanos will be coming for the Skywalkers. Kanos himself had been laying low for the last few years, getting the heat off of his back, earning some cash as a bounty hunter. The Empire has shattered into a billion pieces. However, he is eventually found and captured by none other than Boba Fett. Boba, who successfully set a trap for him in his own apartment. Kanos made short work of all of the thugs that were waiting for him, but Boba entered the room shortly thereafter and surrounded him with more bounty hunters. Taking Kanos into custody, Boba Fett delivered him to a mysterious stronghold world. Waiting for Kanos there was an Imperial faction calling itself the true heart of the Restored Empire. Kanos was shocked to learn that the Restored Empire didn't want to kill him as the previous Empire's factions had. Instead, they believed the tales of his loyalty and bravery as legend, as a man calling himself General Vota explained to him that they honor him as the last member of the Royal Guard, as they too had remained loyal to the memory of Palpatine. However, despite claiming to honor him, they seemed distrustful of him, and they didn't let him walk around their base without an escort. The Restored Empire is led by a now eye-patched individual by the name of Supreme Commander Enix Devian. The Supreme Commander held a banquet in Kanos' favor, attempting to sway him to their cause. This is all going way too easy for Kanos, and Kanos lets him know that he is a dishonorable thug, one of Palpatine's hitmen. Kanos outright says that he does not trust the new Emperor, and he further disapproves of Deviant after watching the way that he treats his officers. He allowed the higher-ups to bully them, call them idiots for minor offenses. Not only this, but the false Emperor has decided to demonstrate his combative training to Kanos, murdering one of his best men in combat right there at the banquet, simply to gain the favor of the Red Guard. But the Supreme Commander is not done trying to win him over. He says that they were never loyal to the ruling council, or the false Emperor Caravis. He explains that they had secretly been building an armada of ships from all of the broken down ones that had been sent to this secret world during the Empire's lifetime. They planned on sending an attack on the New Republic with their secret weapon, a weapon they called the Xynthium, a volatile metal. One small chunk of this metal could destroy an entire city, and the Empire's plan was to invade Coruscant and destroy the government building, breaking apart the New Republic at its head. He desired for the last of the Royal Guard to join them, to lead the front lines of a living symbol of their loyalty to Palpatine. However, Kanos refused. He stated that even though he did serve the Emperor, that he now also knew the Supreme Commander Enix. He knew him as a brutal thug, one who enjoyed bringing misery to others. He stated that he wouldn't think of joining any faction that was involved with him. He had no righteousness, no honor in any way. Enoch would then have a whole squad of stormtroopers who had been waiting behind the meeting jump out and take Kanos into custody. But the Supreme Commander would only moments later discover that the Royal Guard had pickpocketed his blaster right after leaving the room. And after Kanos had killed all of the stormtroopers, he rewired the blaster pistol, using it to explode a wall into the hangar bay. Now claiming several more blasters, he shot his way into the loading dock and escaped using one of the shuttles. However, the Supreme Commander had predicted that he would take this exact course of action and had rigged the shuttles with the dangerous metal, knowing that Kanos would take it back to Coruscant in order to warn the New Republic. As the Red Guard landed, Kanos was arrested by the New Republic and put into a cell for questioning. All they knew is that he had been sent there to murder the Skywalkers. Mirith visited him within his cell in order to catch up. It was here when Kanos explained that he did not intend on murdering the Skywalkers any longer. After visiting the restored Empire, he saw the blind devotion and what it could do to a man. He recalled the cruel way that Enoch acted towards the men under his command, and Kanos accepted that the Emperor that he had served, the Empire that he had fought for, could never be regained. He revealed that he was here to save the New Republic. Unfortunately, he was none the wiser that the dangerous metal was aboard the ship. After the meeting with Kanos, the Skywalkers decided to ultimately trust him, with Luke sensing no treachery, no evil within his heart. Still oblivious to the metal embedded inside of the shuttle though, Kanos agreed to assist the New Republic. Shortly after this, technicians who inspected the ship reported traces of radiation emitting from the shuttle. Realizing that it was set to detonate, Luke immediately assumed that Kanos had laid a trap. He had been told that the Red Royal Guard was dangerous. The Jedi quickly entered the shuttle, flew it deep into orbit, and right before the ship exploded, Luke took the escape pod and managed to get off right in time. Naturally, the blame for the attack fell directly upon Kanos, but by this point, he was already accompanying Mirith Sin to a diplomatic meeting, hoping to discuss a ceasefire between the Republic and what remained of a small Imperial remnant. During the peace summit, the negotiations were interrupted by Enoch's deviant stormtroopers, who attempted to murder everyone present in a surprise attack. Mirith and Kanos managed to grab blasters to take care of the attackers, but in the chaos of the firefight, Fina Diasta was shot and killed. The representative of the Imperials, after eliminating all of the troopers, it was Kanos who offered to be the one to tell Baron Diasta that his daughter had been murdered. He had helped them a few years before. The Baron ultimately understood, as he now realized the extent of Deviant's plot, and he offered an alliance with Kanos to launch an attack on the Supreme Commander's location. The Empire was about to fight the Empire, as the Remnant fought against the Restored in an all-out war. Mirith, Kanos, Baron Diasta, and his stormtroopers invaded one of Enoch's ships, fought through their waves of opposing stormtroopers. With everyone's uniforms looking similar, it was nearly impossible to tell friend from foe. Supreme Commander Enoch attempted to flee in the shuttle once he realized the war was lost, only to be stopped by Kanos. The Royal Guard had one more target. The two square off with their respective bladed weapons, as it was here that Enoch revealed that he was trained by someone special, by Lord Vader. His missing eye was a reminder from Vader about the price of failure. Enoch was far more powerful than Kanos had realized, and he had been thirsting to test his skills against one of Palpatine's finest. As the two entered a fierce battle, Enoch proved to be one of the greatest combatants that Kanos had ever faced. Maybe only Jax had been better. There was no trick that Kanos could pull that the Deviant did not know of. He had been taught as Vader's pupil, and although the Royal Guard was able to knock him down, Enoch managed to cut his vibroblade in half and stabbed Kanos right through the shoulder, right where he had stabbed Jax. It looked as though this would be Kanos' end, but with the last half of his sword, he sliced the blade of Enoch's weapon, which was still lodged in his shoulder, and in one swift movement, he stabbed downwards, driving his vibroblade vertically through Enoch's shoulder and down directly into his heart. He would die there on that ship, having forgotten Vader's most important lesson: never stop fighting until your opponent is dead. Mirith would find Kanos, managing to drag him to a shuttle as he bled out from his wounds, eventually dying a peaceful death. Much later, she would testify before the New Republic that Kanos had in fact died. He was killed in the battle with the restored Empire. In reality though, Kanos had given up his identity as the Royal Guard. He had survived secretly, giving his robes and helmet to Baron Diasta. The Baron had given sanctuary to him while he recovered from his injuries, and had also given him resources to leave, to begin a new life. From that point forward, Kanos officially ended his career. He renounced the empire that he had once loved, and accepted that it was gone forever. And that is the official end of the last surviving member of Palpatine's Royal Guard. Kanos had an excellent run in the lore, and is a very interesting and a complex character. He began as a man who only served out of duty to the galaxy, which rejected everything about his former master. But after someone who finally fulfilled their revenge, he would change. He became his own man, retained his own identity, began to think freely. Along the way, he displayed why Palpatine's Royal Guards were some of the most terrifying warriors that the galaxy has ever seen, however, as there is basically no one even remotely close to Kanos' level of skill. I absolutely adore getting to see what the Royal Guards really have to offer when they aren't simply put on watch duty. I sincerely wish we got to see more of Lord Jax, as he was such an imposing and a powerful villain in the lore, and Jax was a great villain in the post-Palpatine era in Star Wars, and what the galaxy and landscape looks like. An Imperial Guard vying for power makes a lot of sense. I believe having one of Palpatine's Force-sensitive Royal Guards take over after his death is an excellent primary way to take a new enemy, and he would have been a great villain for an NJO order. But tell us, what do you think of Crimson Empire in the comics? And for Kanos as a man and a character, do you want us to do more of these full comic breakdowns? And let us know in the comments down below. But finally, who is your favorite of the Red Royal Guard? And what are your thoughts on Kanos? As always, long live the Emperor, and may the Force be with you.